So here is another tutorial video, and this one's going to be over doors. So there's really two main movements of a door. There is the movement of rotating open and closed, and there's also one of a sliding door, whether it go to the side, up, or even down. So we're going to cover both those different ways here. Let me go ahead and move this back to where it was there. So all I have is two black bars, which would represent the wall that it's behind, and then the actual door itself. And then I have two different triggers, one to open the door and one to close the door, depending on if you want it to be multifunctional. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a nice little script here. And what we'll go ahead and do is open this script. The first thing that I want to do is I want to know where that door is in the world. And so there's two different things that we can do. Number one is we can just tell it to go to a specific variable. The one thing that sucks about that though is if I move this door after um, editing it, then that door will always go back to that same spot in the map, even though now I want it to move somewhere else. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, what is that door's current location when the game starts? And so when world is started, we're going to come over here, and this is variables, the last little tab, and we're going to create a new variable, and we're going to create a vector. And the vector, I'm just going to say door origin, because that's what it is, the door's original location. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to values and we're going to click set to door origin. So now it's saying, okay, we're going to set this to something else in the map. And what do we want to set it to? We're going to come over here to operations, and under operations, we're going to go all the way down until we get to object transform. And underneath it, you're going to see position of object. So we're going to go ahead and put that right here. And then we're also going to create a new variable. It's an object, and this is just going to be door. So mind, we're doing position at this point. Position is just going to tell us where in the map. Since position tells us left or right or up or down, this is going to be a sliding door. If we wanted a rotating door, we would do rotation, which we'll cover here in just a moment. In fact, let's go ahead and cover that at the same time. So in this case here, door origin is going to tell us the position of the door. Now this, when the world is started, is going to automatically change to wherever that door is. If I move that door and then save it, when the world enters next time, it's going to create that vector instead of this vector. Well, we're going to do the same thing with the, right here, variables. And instead of rotation, or instead of vector, we're going to click rotation. And then we're going to click door, and I'm just going to put rot for rotation. And then we're going to go set to, again, we're going to set the door rotation here. And we're going to set it to, again, under that object transform, rotation of object. And we want the rotation of the door. So now, when the world starts, it's going to tell us that the door original position is the position of the door at that time, and then the door rotation is the rotation of the door at that time. Now, we'll only use one for each code that we do, but that's just getting everything out of the way. That way we already have that, and we don't necessarily have to cover the originating point. So now for the actual movement. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here, and since I'm using two different blocks, I'm going to use these blocks to send a signal up to another brain, let's say. Now you can use these by itself if you wanted to, let's say, enter and then exit. What you'd want to go ahead and do is go to events, and when trigger is entered by player, exited by player, you could even do entered by object and exited by object. Again, I have another video all about triggers. I highly recommend going and watching that for a little more information on those there. But in this case here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a movement here, and since again we're doing the sliding door, we're going to go to move to over time. And then what we'll want to go ahead and do is you can put in again a specific vector, which is great and all, but again, if you modify or do anything like that, it's always going to go to this specific vector, which you can go ahead and do. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I pull up the attributes for this object here, I can see position is this position here and rotation is this rotation here. If I wanted to, let's say, grab this here and move it up, as you can see, my Y variable under position starts going up and down. And so I can tell it to start off here as the original position, and then I can manually enter all three of these numbers over here into this vector. So for instance, if I want the door to move up that high right there and to that specific vector, that specific position in this map, what I can do is pull this down here and move to vector. Well, the position is negative 34.10. The Y is 56.94. And the Z is 16.25. Over 1 second on, and what we're going to do is we're going to do, what did we do? Oh, we didn't actually give it a thing to do. So let's go back to this here and we're going to put it on the door. So we're going to move the door to this vector here. How are we going to do it? Well, let's just say when trigger is entered by player. Then what we'll go ahead and do is when trigger is exited by player, we want it to do the same thing, but in this case, let's move it back to its original position. I can either put these variables back into it, so now it's negative 30.4.10, it's 54.96 instead of 56.94, or 16.25 for Z. Or I can grab this door original, because again, when the game starts, it's going to say door rotation or door original position of door when that time happened. So door original, I'll put right here. And so now when we move that object, or when we enter the trigger with the player, it's going to move to that specific vector over 1 second. And when we exit that with a player, we're going to move the door to the position of door origin. And again, this is a sliding door. What we'll do is we'll actually label this sliding door. And then we're going to come down here to our wonderful first little trigger here. We'll put sliding door on here, and then door, we have to come over here and put on the properties for the door. So now anytime this trigger down here is entered by a player, it's going to move the door to that vector or exited the door to the door origin. Let's test it out. Oh, actually, we also want to come down here to trigger and make sure this is on player or object depending on what we want it to do. So now, if I put my hand in here, you can see it goes up there, and then when I pull my hand out, it goes back to its original point. Now here's what I was talking about a moment ago as far as using these nice little vectors, specific vectors. Let's say I'm making my world and I have everything all done, and I'm going to use this as a reference point up here just so you can kind of see where the movement is. Well, let's say I grab all these objects and it just doesn't work in this place in my world. I actually want it over here. Well, now, and I'm just going to restart my world here. So now, these cubes over here, when I put my hand into it, it's going to take it back to that original vector, which is right here. And then when I exit, it's going to take it back to door origin, which is now set over there because I just reset the world. It just saved those coordinates for this variable, door origin, to whatever that location is or that vector is. So if I put my hand in, you're going to see it comes over here, and when I put my hand out, it goes back to door origin, which becomes an issue, right? We don't want it to go back to that place. We wanted to move it with this. So now every time I move this door, I'm going to have to pull this box up and find out where this position is, come all the way back over here to this script, and type in that position. Or what we could do is we could do plus. So under our nice little operations here, all the way to the top, basic operations, the first one is plus, and I'm going to put that right here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say the door origin, because we want that vector, plus, and in this case, we will go over here to values, vector input, and again, x is back and forth, z is left and right, y is up and down. So I'm going to change this to 0.50. So now, whatever this vector is, it's just going to add 0.50 to whatever y is. And what's really cool about that is now when I come over here, if I put my hand in here, it goes up and it goes down, right? But I want to move this back over here to its original place because it just works better in the map. Now, when I put it in there, and I'm going to reset the world because it gets those coordinates when the world starts. If I put my hand in, it goes up and it goes down. And I even moved it. And what's really cool about it is now that we're using these cool little variables to tell it where to put the door, it always finds the right location no matter where we move that object on itself. Again, if you wanted to use the exact vectors, if that works better for what you're trying to do, you're more than welcome to, but this is a nice trick to be able to use. Now, this is indeed a sliding door. Not everybody wants to use a sliding door. Some people want to use a rotating door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these, and we're going to keep everything else the same. When we enter and we exit. And to be honest with you, I don't actually need two of these since I'm only going to use the one. You could use two to send different locations, such as one to open the door and one to exit the door. But for this here, we're just going to simplify it and use one. When we enter the object, it does one item, and when we exit, it does another item. And the thing about rotations is that the rotation is going to happen. So let's go ahead and pull this out right here so we can look at it. So the rotation is going to happen on this item here. So if you can see, if I wanted the door to swing like this here on this hinge, well, if I put a rotation, it's going to swing like this. So it's going to stay in the middle point. Now, there's a couple really fancy mathematics that you can do to make it move the way you want it to do, but we're actually going to cheat here. What we're going to do is we're going to take this item and we're going to bring it over here. And then what I'm going to do is, first off, we're going to take this, go into properties, and we're going to make it non-visible, and non-collidable, because we don't want players to be able to run into that as well, or when the door opens, we don't want this to run into players and move them over to another position. Then what we're going to do is we're going to grab this object here, we're going to group them. So now these two objects are grouped together. And the reason we did that is because now if you look, when I highlight this or I highlight this, the rotation is always on that center point. But when I go into the actual world, I'm not seeing this other door, and because we made it non-collidable, I can walk right through it. So that's why we did that, just to give it a central hinge. So now here is where the actual fun comes into place. So as far as this here, I'm going to take off sliding door, and we're going to forget that. So now, if I go in here and I pull up the properties is going to be over both objects. So now it's using this point here to do what we want it to do. When I go to attributes, I can see the rotation, and I'm actually going to change this to 90 because that's where it should have been. Looks like I moved it off just a tidbit. And then I'm going to go back to this sliding door script, although now I'm going to change it to rotating door, or let's just name it rotate. So when trigger is entered, now we're going to go back to this movement and we're going to rotate 2 over time. Rotate 2 over time here, rotate 2 over time here, and the door rotation is the original position or the original rotation of the door. So I'm going to go back over here, door rotation, and when we exit, we're going to move it back to its original point. When we open it, again, we can come over here, and if you look, it's at 90 right now. If I grab this and rotate it, you can see that the rotation turns just a little bit. We could either come back over here, and we could enter this rotation manually into this little bar here. Rotate to, on enter of player, rotate to this rotation here. But again, if we rotate the door, we put it in a different position, it's always going to go to that same rotation. Now in this case here, since it's not moving, it's going to be in the right placement, just not at the right rotation. So for instance, let's say you put this in and when the world starts or when you click on it, well now it goes to this rotation over here, which is nowhere close to what you wanted it because you wanted it that there. So what we'll go ahead and do is when we enter, what we're going to do is do another addition. So the plus here, and then we're going to grab the original rotation, and the original rotation we know because we set door rotation at the beginning of the world to the rotation of the door at that current time when the world started. And then we want to add, so we come over here to values, go to rotation input and put it in B, and what we want to add to is the Y. So X and Z will rotate it in other ways, but we know Y is rotating that direction there. And it started at 90, and now we're at 194. Well, let's say I just want to do 190. Well, what I can do here is change the Y to 100. So now when we enter the object, it's going to rotate by 100 degrees. When we exit the object, it's going to go back to the original rotation, and this is over 1 second. So let's go ahead and come down here, and we named it rotate up here. So we're going to come down here and we're going to put on rotate, and then we still got to tell it what we're messing with. So we're going to mess with door because these attributes go to that door right there, and we're triggering on player. So now when I enter this here, it's going to go to 194 or 190, and when I exit, well, what did we do here? Oh, I see. We put it on self. We forgot to tell it to do it to the door and not to the trigger zone. As you can see, our trigger actually rotated. So let's try that again. So now if I enter, it goes to that rotation. When I exit, well, The reasoning for it is because I manually moved it. It wasn't in its original rotation there. So let's go ahead and put that back to where it was. And that should have been at 90 degrees. There we go. And let's reset the world. And there we are. So now when I enter it, it'll take the 90 degrees that it's at the beginning of the world and change it to 190. And then when I let go, it goes back to its originating point. If I wanted to stay open, all I have to do is go to our code here and take out this exit. So only when I enter will it open the one time. And so now I can touch this object, enter it, and then on exit it doesn't do anything, and we can enter through that door. And that right there is how to make a sliding door as well as a rotating door. If I went too fast or you have any questions at all, feel free to drop a comment down below. And as always, like and subscribe. It helps way more than you know. Thank you very much.